started. We wanted to wait a few minutes to let everybody get straggled in and grab some pizza. So there's plenty more back there if you guys want any more. Can you go ahead and advance the slide there? So, oh yeah, I got to stand here. Sorry. Used to the other camera up there. We don't have a whole lot of VMUG announcements for this time. We have the, or VMware announcements. VMworld's been announced. I think it's on the next slide, I believe. Yeah. Oh, I guess I forgot our next meeting. Our next meeting's in May. Hey, John, you should have a name tag there, right in front of you there. And then there's pizza in the back there. So we're not sure on the topic yet or the location. We wanted to see how this went tonight before we planned another hybrid event. But I think it'll probably happen in person again, and we'll have to figure out a topic. So if anybody wants to present, let one of the leaders know, and we'll get with you on that. But VMworld is going to be October 5th through the 21st. Registration hasn't opened. I haven't heard when they're going to open it yet, but I think it's probably a couple months out still. The VMUG virtual event, the registration for that has opened up now for the June event. There's a QR code there, or you can just go to the VMUG site, and there's a link on there for it. And I think they added another VMware Connect, which is the kind of like the after party for the virtual event. Last time was we had to basically solve a problem. They put us into teams, and it was supposed to be like a breakout room, but it was actually just solving a case, which was pretty fun. This time I think it's actually just a music band or something that they're doing afterwards. Just a reminder about VMware Champions. If you're not a part of that, just go over to champions.vmware.com. You can do things to earn points and get free swag. That's basically all the announcements I have. Welcome. So we're going to turn it over to Jeremy. Did you already give him the mic? Do you have the mic? Oh, you already have it on. Good. Well, turn it over to Jeremy to start his presentation on AWX.
Ready for me? Yeah. Sorry. All right. Microphone working, all set? Cool. Let me plug in this doodad here. Cool. All right. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Jeremy Becker. Today I'm going to be showing you how to get started with AWX. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Ansible or how many of you are using it currently. So whether you have some experience with Ansible or not, hopefully I can kind of show you what AWX is all about and maybe even have you set it up yourself. So a little bit about me. I'm a systems administrator at Beacon Credit Union. I've worked there for 11 years. I started in high school, so they've treated me really well over there. Dave is my boss, obviously, and some other Beacon folks here. I do a lot of this stuff with Ansible Tower, Splunk, GitLab, end user computing, and then, as you all know, whatever else kind of comes up and is needed tech-wise, I help with. So I've got a computer science degree. I graduated from IPFW with a focus on software engineering. So if you guys want to call me a dirty dev or what have you, I know some of you guys don't really have the best relationships with developers. That is what I'm classically trained as, but you know, whatever they need from me. I enjoy tinkering with Linux. I've done so since college, since that first Linux class at Indiana Tech, actually. I really don't discriminate on what distro to use. I have everything from Ubuntu, CentOS, RedHat. I have a Pop! OS laptop at home, if any of you guys are familiar with that. So I don't discriminate when it comes to Linux distros and flavors. I love to use automation to get more done with less. I'm sure you guys can kind of agree with me that, I mean, we're always doing more and more every day, and things need to get done in a timely manner, and they need to be done in a repeatable way to make sure things work out. And in my free time, everybody has that, a free time point to their About Me slide, right? In my free time, I enjoy lifting weights, watching sports, and reading. I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan, so if you're a Packers fan, doors over there, go ahead and leave, and maybe I'll send you this stuff after. A few disclaimers before I get started here. Anything that I show you today can be done by looking at AWX's GitHub repo and reading through the README. I'm not doing anything revolutionary or something that you couldn't figure out yourself, but I am going to show you the steps to use Docker Compose to set up AWX. So just wanted to tell you that. I don't talk too much about Red Hat's Ansible Tower offering. That is AWX for the enterprise. It includes support and all the good stuff that you get with Red Hat, but I won't mention it too much just because AWX is open source, easy to stand up, ready to get it going. The method that I'll be describing today is actually not the recommended method. They've recently changed in 18.0, they've changed the way that they deploy AWX actually. They use an AWX operator and deploy on Kubernetes. The way that I'll be showing you, the Docker Compose method, is actually the way that you're supposed to use for testing development of the actual AWX platform, but it is, in my opinion, it shows you a little bit more about what's going on in the background as opposed to setting it up in Kubernetes and getting it deployed that way. I mean, if you are more comfortable with Kubernetes, by all means, you can use the Minikube method, or if you have a cluster set up already, whatever. And then lastly, I feel like I have to say this, with AWX updating so frequently, they have a lot of bugs since it is an open source project. So some of the things that I show you today, if you go back and revisit this later on, you may not be able to continue to do it the same way that I did it. Back in, I believe, 17.0, I stood up the newest version and promptly was greeted with no output for the jobs. All the jobs stood in pending states. So that does happen since it is an open source product and run by the community. That does tend to happen sometimes. All right, so a little bit about Beacon's Ansible journey before we get started and showing you what AWX actually does or how to get it set up. So we began using standalone Ansible to automate some tasks. I don't know if anybody is familiar with Jeff Geerling. He wrote some books, one entitled Ansible for DevOps. And that was kind of my start into Ansible and getting started with that. I highly recommend his book, so if I have some resources later on in the presentation, I'll make sure to share it across Slack. They're good. I enjoy his books. He has two, one for DevOps and one for Kubernetes. So those are resources that are out there. He also does a YouTube channel. He's pretty helpful. So if you need some Ansible help, Jeff Geerling seems to be the kind of the guy that will help you with that. We started to use Ansible, began automating some frequent tasks, and then we quickly found that it wasn't really that feasible to use it in a team setting, to have just one Linux box, multi-user environment, a single Ansible control node. It kind of gets a little messy, a little hairy. You have no auditing, role-based access control, or any of the API settings that AWX provides. So we started to explore AWX in a lab setting, stood it up, started to take some of our playbooks that we had written in Ansible and putting them inside of AWX, had good results with that, and that actually spurred us to purchase Red Hat's Ansible Tower offering, which is what we currently have set up, and you'll see some of that with Justin's presentation here in a little while. Obviously, it can be a little daunting to use open source in a production environment, so I highly recommend Red Hat's Ansible Tower. They've done well by us, and they really haven't done too bad. If you are looking to use this in a production environment, I highly recommend them, even if their licensing model is a little antiquated. All right, so what is AWX? It's just this first bullet point here is straight from Red Hat's mouth. It's just an open source community project that enables users to better control their Ansible use in IT environments. Some of those features that I had mentioned earlier, role-based access control, auditing, it has an API, and some other good stuff that really is necessary if you're using Ansible in a more widespread manner. AWX is the upstream project for Red Hat's Ansible Tower, so that means that any new features are introduced in AWX first before they are ported into Red Hat's Ansible Tower. So something to keep in mind. Anything that will hit Ansible Tower will hit AWX first. And then I won't mention it again, but role-based access control auditing, you'll hear me harp on that because that was some of the major reasons that we actually went with the Tower offering in AWX in general. All right, so how do we install it? So these are the two methods here that I've described. Minikube, which is a small Kubernetes cluster, which could be a single host if you so choose. That's actually the preferred method. So if you actually go out to AWX's GitHub repo, you'll find that that's the recommended way. That's the way they'll show you to set it up. And the Docker Compose method is kind of the redheaded stepchild at this point. But that was the way I learned. Docker Compose method was the way I learned, and it's the way that I'm comfortable setting it up. So I figured I would show you guys that way to make sure you can set it up using that method. As I said earlier, the AWX operator is the recommended way to push out AWX since 18.0. Most recent release is 19.0, released 2 weeks ago. And AWX does try to release on a bi-weekly schedule, new releases. The open source community tries to. That doesn't always happen. So by the time you get around to doing this, you may even already have a new version that's out there and ready to be run. If you are going the Docker Compose way, there's some prerequisites here that you'll need. Some of these are self-explanatory. You'll need Docker Compose, the Docker Compose Python module. Ansible will need to be installed on the host as well. And then I put Git in there, but most Linux distros come with Git by default now. But you will need to clone the repo down to make sure that you can deploy AWX. The README, the AWX GitHub documentation goes through installing each of these, so I won't go too deep into the weeds on how to install these components. But the documentation is fairly decent and showing you how to do that, links to how to install Docker Compose if you're not familiar with that. All right, so we're going to get started here. This is the first step. Got a little GIF here. So the first step you're going to want to do is clone down the repo. All we're doing here is specifying the release that we're trying to clone down. So in my case, I'm getting version 19. I'm going to go ahead and clone it down. This is pretty simple, but I wanted to make sure everybody was aware. So when you get around to it, like I said, there may be a different release. If you want an older release, you can go ahead and do 18, 17. Some people are on different versions. I usually try to just deploy the newest one and then deal with whatever breaks, which is sometimes easier said than done. That's the first step, the easiest step. That's how we get started. All right, and then the next step here that we're going to want to do, the inventory file. So before I tell you about the inventory file, you have to understand that AWX is deployed using Ansible. So they use Ansible playbooks to deploy AWX on your host. So this inventory file is a few things that you need to set up before you can deploy the AWX instance. So the inventory file is actually found in the AWX tools Docker Compose folder. That's the file that you'll want to go in and edit. And there's a few things here that you need to set up, or you could even go ahead and not set up any of these settings if you so choose. As you can see in the inventory file there, it says if left blank, the secrets will be generated upon install, and it shows you the location of those secrets if you want to go back and reference them later on. In my demo deployment, I didn't set up any variables, any passwords, any of that good stuff. I just let it do its thing, create them, and then write them to that directory. And it works just fine, so you are able to do that. A Postgres DB is created on the host, and then it's persisted in a volume, unless you specify an external one, which is that second stanza there, external database settings. If you guys have an external database, chances are if you're setting up AWX for the first time, you don't have a Postgres DB out there full of AWX goodies. So you could probably go ahead and skip that as well. And then lastly there, second line from the bottom, it shows the AWX image that's deployed or that's going to be used. You are able to change that image as you so see fit. I always use the development one myself, but there are a few more out there. If you go out to quay.io, AWX, you can see a few more of the versions that you can run. But for the most part, the Docker Compose method usually uses the development image. All right, so we've edited the inventory. We've made some changes to those files or not, depending on how you set it up. And now all we have to do here is build a development image, right? So we build a development image by using a makefile. It's called, well, the makefile is the makefile, but you make docker-compose-build that uses Ansible to build the image that you specified with the inventory settings that you also specified. And it'll go through the process here. Obviously, I don't have the whole process written out here because it would take a little long for a GIF. But it'll go ahead and download all that good stuff, run updates on those images and all the goodies that we need. Once the image is finished and it's been built, you'll be able to see the Docker image that you have created by running Docker images. You can see that second screenshot there, that it is kind of a large image, so it may take you a while to build. But once the image has been built, we're ready to deploy the containers. I mean, it's really pretty simple. They've automated the process to the point where you don't have to do a whole lot. Just type in a couple commands and do your thing. All right, so we've made the image and we're ready to go ahead and stand up AWX. Once you've built the image, you're going to have 3 containers that you bring up: an AWX container, the Postgres DB, and then the Redis DB. Redis can be a lot of things, but DB cache, memory broker, all kinds of stuff. So once you have, when we're getting ready to actually stand up the image, we'll want to run make docker-compose, and that will go ahead and stand up the containers, as you'll see here. The way that you'll know that it's ready to connect to and ready to reach out to is by seeing that second image there. It'll show you that our syslog is running on the tools_AWX_1 container. That means at this point, AWX is up and ready to receive requests. Now, one caveat to that is that at this point, we stood up AWX, but we don't have a UI. Okay, so we've got the API up here. The API is reachable. We could log in as the admin user that's created by default. But if you actually try to hit the UI, you won't be able to use the UI. You've got to create that in a separate step. So that's some of the goodness that comes with Docker Compose. Maybe a little bit of a roundabout way of doing it, but they do show you how to do that, and I'll show you how to do that as well. Once those migrations are up, you could go ahead and hit the IP of the host that you're setting this up on. Use port 8043. That's the default port. You could go in and change that port in the inventory file if you so choose. I think that's a little out of scope of this presentation, but you could go in there and hit the API and see the same thing I see there in the third screenshot. So the API is accessible, AWX is up. I mean, technically we could go in there and make requests to the REST API, create inventories, templates, run jobs if we so wanted to. But for somebody that's using AWX the first time, that probably isn't feasible. So we're going to want to go ahead and build the UI. All right, so this is where it gets a little hairy. You need to have the AWX containers running and stood up before you were able to build a UI on it, obviously. So what I've done here is I actually went ahead and ran make docker compose with the lab admin user in the other terminal window there. And then once you go ahead and do that, it'll stay up if you Control-C out, and it'll bring your containers down, and it'll stop you from doing anything. By default, the make file actually allows you it actually attaches to the container by default immediately. So we could go into the make file and do some magic to make sure it doesn't connect to the Docker container, but that's once again, out of the scope of this presentation. So my workaround was to log in as a separate user while lab admin went ahead and stood up those containers and then run docker exec tools underscore AWX underscore 1 make clean-ui ui-devel. And that just goes ahead and it uses makefile on that container to go ahead and create our UI and get it set up for us and ready for us to use. It does take a little while to create that UI. Nobody judge my typos there. It does take a little while for you to stand this up and get the UI deployed, so don't get too impatient because it is worth it. When you are done with getting the UI stood up, you can go ahead and hit that IP again at that same port, and we'll hit /home, and that'll give us to the login page. So we're at the login page, but do we have a user that we can log in as? They do create an admin user for you by default when you make Docker Compose, but that password for that admin user is in the output of the log, and once it's scrolling by, it's not all that easy to find. So what I went ahead and did was create another super user here. We do that by connecting again to the tools underscore AWX underscore 1 container, running AWX-manage create super user, and that gives us an admin user in the system. So it'll ask you the username, password, email, all that good fun stuff, and then you'll have an admin user that's ready to be used in the system. And then the last step in our process for standing up Docker, or AWX, I'm sorry, is to load the demo data. So for the demo data is just a demo template, a demo inventory, and a demo credential, I believe it also creates. But by doing that, we do this by connecting to the tools underscore AWX underscore 1 container again. I feel like I'm repeating myself here. And just using AWX manage to create the preloaded data. So AWX-manage create underscore preloaded underscore data. And you'll see during my execution here, I'd already run the command. I already have the demo data. So it will show me that nothing actually changed and give you that false reading there. But at this point, once we've got the demo data, we're actually ready to show you what AWX actually looks like. Let me share again. All right, so this is up in the lab. This is just a CentOS 8 machine that I set up for something to look at AWX with. And here we are. So this angry potato, it's kind of hotly debated in the AWX community. The angry potato, angry spud, whatever you want to call it. It's actually pretty easy to change that logo on the front page, but as you'll see once we log into the actual GUI, it might not be that easy. So I like to keep the angry spud around to make sure that I know this is the development environment, this is our lab environment. I don't want to accidentally run something against production. So I tend to keep that in place if I can. And here we are. So this is AWX here. Really pretty simple. This is the dashboard view here. Shows you all kinds of hosts, inventories, projects, all that good stuff. Shows you the job status of the runs that you've made previously. And then whenever Justin goes into Tower and forgets to change his credential, it'll have all kinds of failed jobs here that we'll see, and we'll yell at Justin like we always do. But yeah, this is the dashboard, the home page. Pretty simple. I don't want to go into too much detail here. You can go back and look at recent jobs and all that good stuff if you so choose. Schedules. I'm just going to go through each of these very short, quick, try to give you a quick rundown of what each does, and then I'll kind of let Justin go into a little more detail when he does show you playbook runs. So the schedules page, fairly self-explanatory. These are just scheduled jobs in the AWX environment that we're running. It'll show you what we're running, when we're running it, who's running it, what kind of job it is, all that good stuff. You can schedule not only jobs that do actions on actual hosts and inventory, you can also schedule project updates or inventory updates. Say you created a new virtual machine, you want to pull a new virtual machine from VMware You can do so through a scheduled action if you so choose. The activity stream, pretty similar to jobs and schedules. I didn't go through jobs, but most of this is pretty similar. Just kind of shows you what was done in the system, who did it, and all that good stuff. So that auditing that we were talking about. And one other cool feature that we have here, I don't have any set up in our lab environment, but workflow approvals. So you could create a workflow, and depending on what the workflow entails, say you need an IP address from an IPAM solution, you could have an approval built into a playbook that would require somebody to approve that IP is giving it out. So it's just a way to kind of build in some supervisory tasks inside of workflows. And I believe, I could be wrong, but I think that Justin may show you that later as well. So that's the views portion. That's mostly just all that good stuff there. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of stuff. The resources page is really the big thing that this is the building blocks of AWX. Job templates. So a job template, think of a job template as your playbooks, right? So you import your playbooks into projects, which I'll show you here in a second, and then you run those playbooks using job templates. So let me drill down to this demo job template we have here, show you what I'm talking about. All right, so you can see here, this is the hello_world. This is that demo job template. So we're running that playbook there, hello_world, and from the demo project with the demo inventory. So I'll show you all that good stuff there. There's a lot of choices that we have when we are running these Ansible playbooks. We're able to define different credentials that you want to run it as, how many forks, which is how many parallel runs you want to have against your inventory. Say you only want to run it against 2 or 3 at a time. You can go ahead and choose 2 or 3 forks on this drop down here, and that would allow you to only have 2 running at it simultaneously, finish those 2, and then move on to the next 2 in your inventory. Verbosity would just change the output of the job. We're able to elevate privileges in case we need things where we need extra privileges. We can enable webhooks to where you can receive a webhook for your template, and then it will go ahead and run your job template for you, run jobs concurrently, all that. So that's templates, that's your playbooks, and that's the way those run. So I just explained to you projects as well. Projects are actually where templates come from. So projects usually are GitHub Git repositories that we pull down playbooks from. So the project allows us to use Git, Subversion, remote archive, all that good stuff. If you do use manual, you need to have those playbooks on the local AWX container, which can get a little hairy, obviously. So something to keep in mind. Usually in our environment, everything that we run is actually contained inside a Git repository. And you're able to specify different things such as the branch that you actually want to pull down, the tag, commit, all that good stuff. And you can update the revision on launch, which means it's going out and grabbing the newest version in your Git repository, and it's running the most updated version of your playbook. Whatever the last commit was, it's making sure it's cloning it down and using that. All right, so projects. Templates derive from projects, and we take templates and we run them against inventories. So inventories, pretty self-explanatory here. It allows you to create inventories that you want to run Ansible playbooks against. Here I have a Windows -lab inventory. And one thing I wanted to point out, you will need, if you're doing Ansible playbooks against Windows inventory, you are going to need a little bit of finessing to make sure that get that to work correctly. You're going to want to connect using WinRM. There are other choices. WinRM is the preferred one. The port that you're running, that you're exposing for WinRM, and then a transport for your WinRM. We use Kerberos in our environment. But these are just hosts. So let me show you here what I've done. So these are hosts in our lab that we've pulled actually from vCenter. So we are able to pull our lab or our inventory information from vCenter, specify certain host names, certain filters for host names, and bring those in. So what I've done here is I'm logging into our lab vCenter instance, and I'm looking for anything that's Windows space in the VM name. Pretty simple. Let me show you what that does. If we did go out and let me pull up this Windows lab here, we're going to delete one of the hosts from here, and then I will show you that they do populate back in when we run that source refresh. So all we're going to do is go over here and sync the process. This is going back out to vCenter and saying, hey, give me all your Windows space VMs, and please throw them in this into this inventory. So that's a good way to keep your inventory up to date. You can either schedule that if you so choose. You can make sure the inventory is updated before you run any playbooks using it. But yeah, that's something that's pretty helpful to make sure that you have all your hosts. So it completed, and I'll just come back here and show you that Windows 10 GM is back, and we're ready to run jobs against it. All right, so credentials. I'm not going to go into too much detail here with credentials. All I'm going to tell you is there is a ton of them, and there are a ton of different ways that you can create credentials, even to the point where you can create your own credential types, custom credential types if you so choose. In our environment, we did create a new credential type for a run as credentials, and we use that for PowerShell runs. So something that you may use, something that you may not use, but they have a lot of stuff built in, and you are able to actually go ahead and add to it. Just to show you here, we've got lots of stuff, all kinds of credentials that we need. And you use those to run against, you assign credentials to templates, and the template would then use the credential to connect to the host as you see fit. That's resources. That's all the good stuff, all the building blocks of what Ansible and AWX do. And let's get back to some of that role-based access control. So in AWX, we have organizations. It's the most basic building block of access control. So say we have, this is the lab organization, but say we had an IT organization, you're able to then create teams underneath these organizations, and that's the way you show what to give people give rights to users. So it's a little abstract when you're looking at it here, but in our environment, we have a BTech organization, and then we have teams for level 1, level 2, different teams to have different rights. So we have our help desk staff that actually have their own team, and they are able to run a select handful of playbooks. We obviously don't want them to go in there and create new VMs as they seem, as they want to, or reboot servers or any of that good stuff. So we only give them the things that we need. So let me drill down into a team here, kind of show you what I'm talking about. It shows you the access of the people that is in the actual team, and there's also roles included within here. So this test team has the role of read on the demo job template. So that means that if I logged in as somebody that's in this team, which I believe my LDAP user is, yep. So if I logged in as my lab user here, just to show you that I'm not lying, we've got the template. Oh, here's the demo job template, but I can't even run it. I couldn't run it if I wanted to. So this is all read-only permissions using that team to only allow me to read that job template and anything that any details that go with it. So yeah, that's the basic gist of permissions and access control. It gets a little deeper than that, obviously, but really just think of it as you add users to teams, you give teams rights to organizations, and then you give rights to templates. All right. One more thing that I wanted to kind of show you was the notifications. So there's all kinds of notifications that we can set up by default. Email, all that good stuff, Slack, messages if you have Slack, IRC. We can let people know that, hey, your playbook failed, hey, your playbook ran correctly, hey, Justin, fix your credential, whatever you seem to want to do. Notifications are pretty important. I use them fairly frequently, but you are able to send notifications within Ansible playbooks themselves. So if you wanted to do a notification separate from the templates that AWX provides, you could do that as well. And then lastly, the management jobs is just something that I wanted to show you. There's some management jobs that are built in by default. They clean up the activity stream, and those are usually scheduled at a certain time. If I went back to the schedules there, you would see exactly that they run. I think it's on a monthly basis, but yeah, it cleans up the activity stream, so that means that anything that was run is cleaned up and it doesn't have any of that history. So that'll be important if it's really important to you to audit what you're doing in the system to make sure that you set up the cleanup for the activity stream with a good retention period. All right. There's one last thing I wanted to show you, just because I know this might come up later on, the LDAP settings. So I did go ahead and set up LDAP on this instance before I came to present to you guys. This is kind of a lot, but the documentation that AWX or Tower provides actually do a pretty good job of showing you how to fill in these things. It's pretty normal LDAP user search stuff if you've done it before, but I did want to show you that you can do LDAP binding if you so choose. And that's how we have it set up in our environment. And that also allows you to give people access to certain organizations, make them admins without having to go in and by hand give everybody team rights, give everybody rights to roles and all that good stuff. So as you can see here, there's my lab organization. And I defined who the users are in that organization and the admins as well, based on LDAP properties. All right, that's about it. Setting up AWX and then using it. Let me share my screen here one more time. I don't know that it's really necessary, but I'll share it anyway. Just in case you have questions, show my question slide. If anybody has questions, I know I talk awfully fast. So if you have any questions, I guess I can field those. Either I did a good job or a bad job. Yeah.
How many templates do I have in there?
Too many. Most of our environment in Tower is set up for Justin to run his VMware jobs. So there is a lot of usage that we can garner for VMware environments. So I think it could probably provide a lot of benefit to you guys, whether you've already started using Ansible or not. All right. Thank you, guys.
While Justin gets set up, I did want to mention a couple things that I forgot earlier. If you do have questions, please use the mic so that those online can hear, and then also that it gets recorded with the recording that'll go on YouTube. If it isn't on the mic or it doesn't come across, then the presenter will restate it. But, for those that are online, if you have questions, either just put it in the chat or put your hand up in there, and the moderator will help you with that. So.
No one's up here. Take this off. Almost ready. Cool. All right. My name is Justin Brant. I'm a systems administrator with Beacon Credit Union. Some new faces. Seen a lot of you here before. I'm a V expert. I've been one for 3 years now. Fort Wayne VMUG leader. David dragged me into that about 3 or 4 years ago. Husband, dad of 2. I have a 5-month-old and a 3.5-year-old. They are keeping us very busy currently. I've recently gone down the path of becoming a first responder. I'm a volunteer EMT and firefighter for the Convoy Fire Department. So during my off time, I'm usually running around in an ambulance, playing with lights and sirens, having a fun time. That's about it. I'm pretty simple. You'll see me in Slack. If you want to know more, just talk to me. I'll tell you about anything you want in my life. As Jeremy said, I use Tower a lot. This was a conversation just a couple days ago. I probably have between 75 and 100 VMware jobs in there for various things. Some things I want to go back and redo. Some things I don't want to touch 75 job templates to go through and redo them. But that is just what it is. We're going to jump into demo because my demo takes a little longer because we're going to spin up a VM and kind of run through the process of what your end user is going to see. Let's minimize this and go change sharing around thanks to the way the Zoom works. All right, so I've logged in. This is as if you were logging in as an end user, not as an admin. So if my staff, let's say Jeremy comes along and says, hey, I need a VM, great. So he can go into templates here. I only have one template shown here. If I can get this to go out of the way, thank you. Hang it the little rocket ship, and I've already pre-populated some information for him. So I've put in some information he's going to agree to the fact that he knows when he deploys a VM from here, it's going to automatically join it to the domain, and agree that the policy and terms that come along with doing that, because in our environment we have specific procedures that we need to follow. You can choose VMware locations. I just have it created from Tower just as a basic one to drop it in, but if he wanted to go put it in his AWX folder or a Citrix folder or something along them lines, we can do that. We give it a name. So we'll do VMUG, whoops, Q. And since this is production, I'm not going to open some of these. So right here we have where the OU it's going to end up at. So what will happen is when we go to create this VM, we actually have a procedure and policy in place that we have to create the AD object before we join something to the domain. So I have you select your OU that you want that to end up in first, and I have PowerShell script that's in my workflow that'll run through and drop that in there. We have pre-populated here with some different OSs, different features. We're just going to deploy Server 2019. Quick and easy. We're going to give it 2 cores, 4 gigs of RAM. You can go through and pick which data store you want it on. So if you have like a DRS cluster that handles all of your storage, you can just put that in there. You can even remove this option and define it on the back end that I want all these new VMs to go in one particular place. I give them the option. Our Citrix guys may want to put VMs in particular data stores and base images and things like that. I've pre-populated network information here. So we have DHCP on our Citrix network. So I'm just going to leave that in so I don't have to go to the IPAM solution, pull an IP address, wait for Ethan to approve it. We'd be here all night. But if you had that information, you could just go along here and type it in. And I have variables on the back end that will change the playbook based on the information you've provided. In our environment, we're really starting to get heavily in using tags for automation. So I can go along here and I can say I'm the owner of this VM. And sometimes we have double owners. So Jeremy's going to be the other owner of this VM. We have different statuses, whether we want it to be development, non-production, production, replica, testing, training. So we're just going to toss this under test. And I don't have a reason to put a Citrix tag on it because it's not a Citrix VM. You can make your fields where they are required. So for example, I got the little asterisk up there, owner tag is required. That way we know who's deploying that VM. So click Next. It'll have you review all the variables that you've put in. This is one I want to point out. When you put credentials in, it'll encrypt them. You cannot see them. So if you're just like this in a presentation, you don't have to really worry about that. But I can specify what I want to be the local password, and let's say he wants a different one. He can go and change that. But it won't show you what I had originally put in there. So this allows an end user who may not have the privilege of that password to put a VM request in and change that password, whatever they need it to be. So there's all that information. We'll go ahead and hit launch. Okay. So you're going to get presented this screen. This is typically your template job running screen. And what this is I have it set up in a workflow. So if I zoom in here, everything has its own little workflow. So right now it's not moving, okay? Let me change my share again. Get that little bar out of the way. New share, this one, share. All right, so now I'm logged in as an admin. I see up here in the right-hand corner, I got a little bell. Sweet, let's check that out. Hey, look at that. We've got a VM creation. So we can click on it, and I can see exactly what my user put in. I can go, okay, yep, he's doing it in testing, temp storage. Everything here looks all right. You know, just spot checking, make sure he's not requesting a VM, 192 cores and 2 terabytes of RAM. Don't want to overload the cluster. We also get this, an email. So this is the first email that comes in telling me that it was submitted. This is just very generic. This is right through Tower. It automatically does it. The other email I was expecting to be there is not there. Okay. When I hit approve, it will be there, so. God, I wish I could share the desktop. All right. So we'll go ahead and approve the job. And we can already see job turned green, and now it's sending the approval email. And we can actually hit details on this job and go in deeper and see the Ansible playbook running. How do I get rid of this? There we go. All right. Sorry, I'm fighting with Zoom. So your end user, the admin will get the approved email. And obviously, since I'm the admin and the end user, I'm going to get both emails. They automatically get an email saying, hey, your VM got approved. Sweet. Tells you to go grab a cup of coffee and be ready 10, 15 minutes because it's auto provisioning. And if you want to go check out the progress, you can click on your little workflow item here. It'll send you off and you can go check it out. And then we'll go check this one more time. And then we'll come back to it. And this is, when you click on that link, this is what you'll see. You'll be able to go in here and see exactly what it's doing. All right, it's gone through the AD creation. Now it's in VMware. It's going through and spinning up the VM. All right, and we can see that right here. I should have had this open already. So we can see right here, the VM's being created, and down here in the bottom, you can see it's cloning the VM, just like a typical VMware deployment. So while that runs, let's go check out what else we got in our slides here. Share. Current slide. Wow, that's not as small as I thought it was going to be. So this is a snippet from the playbook that I've developed. This is straight out of the Ansible modules. Nothing complicated or custom done here. You can see where I've built in all the variables. So, name of the VM, some of our custom credential sets. Just build all that information in there, filled it in. So we're going to break it down a little bit here. So on this particular playbook, it can run from the Ansible host directly. I don't have to go out to a Windows host and run it from it like I do some of my PowerShell scripts. So this just connects to localhost. We don't need to gather facts because we already know what the facts are. And then we pass in the credentials, which Jeremy talked about the run as, run a RA username, RA password. That's what it's using to authenticate against VMware. Here's some general information that you're going to give so that it knows where to go. I want it to talk to vCenter. I'm giving it a username, password. I don't want it to validate certs because cert management on VMware is not the greatest currently. Passing through just basically passing through information. And there's information I have in here that's static. I don't really want the end user to pick what cluster it's on or what data center it's going to because I've already defined that based on the templates I give them. Here's where you're defining all the different, CPUs per cores, the type of networking you want. We try to standardize on the VMXNet 3 adapter, so I don't let them pick an Intel E3000 or E1000 or any of that nonsense. Network customizations. I haven't commented out here because the one I picked was the DHCP part of it. But if you had it further down in this playbook, and I should have took a screenshot, I didn't think about it. That's uncommented because you can sort out by using where in your playbook. So when they select static, it'll skip down to that part of the playbook, and it'll skip the rest of them. And that's where I have DNS servers already defined, our search domain, or our DNS suffix, and our domain. That way, the end user doesn't have to worry about that. The only thing they need to put in there is that gateway, the IP address, the net mask, which they'll get all from the IPAM solution. Local password. Time zone was a fun one to deal with. It's based on Python, and you have to go, I haven't found a good way to go. You have to just go Google it and find what time zone you're in and the number. So if you're in this area, it's going to be 35. Why they can't just put Eastern in there, I don't know, but that's what it is. Now this is using the API for guest customization that's built into VMware. So it's going to go through and join the domain automatically using the customization, just like as if you were to deploy it, a template in VMware through the GUI, it's going to ask you for those customizations as you go. So using the RA username and password, we have domain rights to be able to join machines. It's going to join it up. Wait for IP addressing, customization, basically it's just the job will pause there because I have steps after that I don't want it to do until I know that job has passed. Because there have been times when VMs have been deployed, and if you give it the wrong network and can't join domain, it'll fail the deployment, but then your end user gets an email saying, hey, your VM's ready to go. No, it's not. And then the when, not where, it's when. So when type is DHCP, and I chose the template of CentOS 7, that's when it's going to use the playbook that I've taken the picture of. We obviously used one with Windows and DHCP, so that's a little bit different playbook than this one, but it's identical no matter which OS you use. Okay, let's go see where that's at. Share screen. Okay, so it's still running through. Now, when you run a workflow like that, it's going to create jobs for each step that we've gone through. So if you need to analyze a particular step, you can just click on your workflow. It'll bring up all the jobs that it's created so far, and we can just click into one and go check it out. Actually, that one's for a different one. Yes. Come on. Sweet. So our deployment is done. And it's sent an email already, and then it's actually going through and creating a CR in our change request system saying, hey, someone's deployed a VM. Great. Let's check out the email that we got, make sure it came through like it's supposed to. There you go. It's all good to go. We can actually go join up and check it. Before I make a fool of myself, let me make sure I can remote desktop to it. PCs must be Q. Save. Share. Oh, okay. Can't connect to it. Probably a GPO problem, which I had that earlier this week. And so we will just go here. I'll let you guys see it in a second. I'm not going to let you watch me type my password. Okay. Users VM's ready to go. That took, what, 7 minutes, 8 minutes? Has all the updates they need, has software already pre-installed, following our corporate policy. Nice, easy, quick, ready to go. And I've even considered building onto this. So if like a user requests, we want the VM to have file services enabled, or they want it to be an AD server or something of that sort, we can utilize PowerShell and PowerShell remoting through Tower and go out and configure those services for them. So that, you know, in that 10, 15 minute period, boom, it's ready to go. Okay, so, let's see, new share. Okay, so moving on a little bit from the VMware portion of it, getting into some of the little finer touches of, you know, sending out an email to your end user. Ansible has a playbook for sending out emails. Works great. We just build it out. It's an HTML, so if you want to send a really fancy email, you could. I kept it simple. And you can still nest all those variables down into it. You know, hey, you know, Tower's first name, so, you know, I don't have to go through and custom build templates for each user. It just pulls it from their Tower profile or wherever you're authenticating from. Built all the information, getting all the Tower job workflow ID in there. That way your link works, and then just gives them just a rundown of everything done. What was the difference between those? So this is when we're doing anything PowerShell related. So for example, I do CR submission through PowerShell. I'm sure Jeremy could school me in some API nonsense and go through and do it all through natively through Ansible, but I know how to write PowerShell, so I write it. Basically what we're doing here is we are connecting to a host that we use to run scripts. It connects into it using our run as method, and then it becomes me. So it's just like, almost just like if I was sitting at the desktop. There are still nuances you can't do, but it's using my credential set. We run through, we copy the files down. We have found this to be an effective method is by using your Tower job ID. We had a problem where if a job would fail, it would copy the files over, but then the files would not get removed. So we found out using the Tower job ID, we don't have a bunch of files sitting out there that are just randomly, you know, over top of each other. If two jobs get ran at the same time, they're in their own designated folders. So we copy all that over, which all of that is stored in my GitHub or the GitLab repo that we have. So every time I run a script, it copies the script stuff information down, the latest version it needs, runs a script. And then I just pass everything through as parameters. So the variables that I have in surveys, which reminds me I need to go back and show you surveys. I just pass in to all through the parameters, just like you would, anytime you want to run a script that's scheduled. Once that has ran, then we can go through and clean it all up. So we just get rid of all the files there, and boom, nothing's left on the server. So it doesn't need a giant amount of storage or anything like that. While I'm thinking about it, let's go check out a survey, because that's pretty important. Here we go. We will go to, oops, let's go back. Workflow. This is how you build out the GUI part of it for your end user. Pretty easy. Just kind of go through here, put what you want. Most of my stuff's are drop downs. I can go in here and I can edit. We have the option of using text area, a password field, just a straight text, multiple selects, single selects, required, not required, and then we just build out all the selections. One of my gripes with AWX, and I'm sure it can be fixed, and I'm sure it will be fixed at some point, is I haven't found a way to do dynamic surveys. So if you have a crazy large environment that's constantly changing, your data stores, your templates, you manually have to go in here and change your survey. I'm sure there's a way to update it. We just haven't implemented it yet, and we've been working on other things. So we'll update that. Cancel. And then Y was in here. Let's see, it's this one. Now for those PowerShell jobs that you run, I don't know if there will be anything out on this one, nope. If you do need like write hosts or something that needs an output, or you have an error message, you can go back, go into your run book or your template or the job that ran. I'll get it out eventually. And then you can pull it up just like this. And a lot of my scripts, I usually have some type of output saying it did X, Y, and Z. That way, if I need to go back and check to see if something failed or why something failed, I have all the information ready for me in here. It's all logged, it's all saved. Close that out. Back to my PowerPoint here. I was past that. Gotcha. And I'll do this one. Cool. If you've done any PowerShell scripting, I'm sure you've messed with parameters. This is exactly how I do it at top most of my scripts. I literally go find one that I've done before, copy and paste, changes what I need it to. That way I don't have to do a bunch of manual typing or anything like that. And I've automated a lot of things. I get reports daily. I get things, I pester my users about their snapshots. That's a big one. Everyone loves it when I send them emails saying, hey, your snapshot's over 3 days, take care of it. And we even have, at this point, we're using WebEx Teams, and I'm starting to do some automation with webhooks and APIs to be able to put information in there. Those are just what's built in. That's not even what the community has built. I've seen some pretty cool stuff, community built stuff, but we don't use a lot of that stuff because of the way our environment's set up. I haven't even scratched the surface. Jeremy, this guy right here in front, has actually done a lot more in it than I have, because he's done what you've done, provisioning with ESXi. Or sorry, Bobby. I had Jeremy on the mind. Provisioning. You can do provisioning hosts, doing changing data stores. I mean, you can literally write your whole deployment for your environment. So if your environment died tomorrow, you could go, oh well, I have an Ansible playbook for that. Click. And redeploy your whole VMware environment through it. I haven't found anything that I can't do in it yet. and I'm still digging the rabbit hole. I am no expert by any means. Yep. Some of that I've already covered. Another one of my fun projects was auto tagging VMs. Our Citrix guys generate a lot of VMs. They'd really hate me if I told them they had to go tag every one of them individually. So we wrote PowerShell script to go through and do that. And that's all ran in Tower. It runs every night. That's about it. Anything particular someone wants to see? Questions about it? Let's see. So when scripts are running, could you just use PowerShell to call Terraform deployment plan? I would really like to do something that myself, as I've found some cloud services have more support for Terraform than Ansible might have. Ideally, I'd like to pass info from a form to a Terraform plan using Ansible, if that is even possible. Yes, you can call PowerShell. I don't know if you'd be able to call Terraform specifically, but if Terraform has the modules, then you could call it through Tower. Where is? I can pull up. Did I do it wrong? Ah, there we go. Oh, I guess I could show this too. So when you're building workflows, I use use workflows to tie jobs together, get approvals, things like that. A job template by itself, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, job template by itself doesn't have an approval process, right? Yeah, just workflows. Correct, just workflows. So even if you have one job template, you just want to have approval for them to run, you have to do it through workflow. This is where things get a little crazy for me. So I have like 70 plus job templates. I only have like 5 workflows, but that's because I literally take all those job templates and toss them into a workflow. So if I have a new report I decide I want to run every day, I go in here and I throw it in my reports daily, and it'll run. And I have all these jobs right here running at the same time. But I actually wanted to. You can just click on it. It'll create a new one here. And then you can go through and you can give it whatever you want to do. So we'll do like Citrix hide session here. Always run. Convergence. And then we can have it prompt up here, and I can automatically fill that workflow in for them. Since I don't have, on this particular job, I don't have a survey at the beginning to fill that information out further downstream. So cancel that out. Go back. He's wanting to know more about PowerShell. Completed jobs. I'm trying to think of a way to show that to him. You would basically just follow the same process that I documented earlier here. I think this would answer your question. Basically, if it's a PS1 file, it can run. The only time that I've ran into a limitation with PowerShell running in this context, I developed a script to take basically a Word document and convert it to a Word document and format it and do a bunch of other things with it. That has to be ran in a desktop context. It cannot be written in a scheduled context. But that's a limitation of Microsoft Word, and really the way I did it was stupid, and there are much better ways to do it nowadays. But you should be able to, long as Terraform has the modules for it. Any other questions? Anything anyone wants to see? Oh, right. We set stuff up real easy, right? What about tearing it back down? Funny you ask. FWVMUG Q. Anyone remember? Did I make that all capitals? I did. For demo, of course. Cool. So I don't need that VM anymore. I don't want it in my environment. I want it gone. I just go in here. I understand it's going to delete it from data store. It's going to remove it from our Active Directory. Give it the name. Give it the business reason for removal, just because it's going to submit a CR. Just so we have that whole life cycle. We got it from the time we started to the time we get rid of it. Okay. It's going to submit for approval. And since I'm the admin, we'll just approve it. YOLO. I don't have anything fancy really set up with this one. This one literally just goes, powers off the VM, removes it from the Active Directory using PowerShell, submits the CR, and that's it. And if we go here, oh, actually, the job's already ran. Power off virtual machine, deleted, and it's gone. And vCenter is angry because it can't find it. That's just my demo. Questions?
Can you demo a schedule? Can you go over how to schedule a snapshot deletion? Like to do the scheduling?
Yeah, I'll go through that. Snapshot.
Click VM snapshot.
Yep, it is that one, isn't it?
No, that's the one.
Yep.
I said.
Now you done did it.
Search for snap.
No. Remove snap. I'm still working on a better process than this, but it's pretty easy. Go in here, and we decide we want to delete a snapshot. We can hit add new schedule. Delete. Whoops. Just take whatever. We can pick a date. That is tomorrow at midnight. Check our time zone. We only want to run once. So it won't let me save it because this has a survey on it. So we go and hit prompt. We can select which vCenter we want it to be. Because we're going to delete test. Test snapshot. Okay. It shows the credentials we're using there. So we're using a machine credential, which allows it to go out to GitLab, GitLab, download the script, and then we're using the run as just as authentication credentials to get to VMware. Go ahead and hit confirm. And if we go down here, once it refreshes.
You forgot to hit save.
Really? This is what you do. This is what happens when you put me on the spot. Prompt. Confirm. Save. Cool. And now it shows up here in our schedules. And it can be useful for lots of reasons. Maybe you don't want to cause I/O issues during the middle of the day. Maybe you don't want to be in there when the VM crashes because you remove a snapshot. Whatever you feel. Let's say we decide we don't want to delete that. We can either just turn it off, Great, it's not going to run. It'll be worthless after midnight tonight, so I'm just going to get rid of it. I would like to eventually get it where I don't have to give the end user permission to this, but I'm not API smart enough yet to get in there and know how to schedule jobs via the API. The guy there in the blue shirt would be the one to ask about that. Jeremy loves it when I bring him ideas. And usually my ideas come from that guy. If you want a quality control tester, hire David. His guy goes, oh, you have a bar app. Let me try to order, I don't know, a car. And then you have to build in functionality that doesn't allow you to order a car.
Can you show them how you're doing the 3-day snapshot thing? Removal.
That's yep. It's through PowerShell. I'll actually just bring up the code for that. Hold on. Snapshots. Oh. Get rid of that. If anyone judges my code, I'm all for getting feedback. And if anyone comes up with a one-liner, do this, I don't know, 117 line script, I'm all for it too. I've had that happen too. Sweet. Everyone see that? Good? Okay. Basically, we're walking through, we're connecting in. We go ahead and first thing we do is grab the owner of the VMs. So David doesn't care that I have a snapshot on my VM. He's going to tell me to go remove it anyways. So I try to separate it out where you only get notified for your own VMs. And then we run through, and for each owner, we go through, we build out their email. And that way, I don't go do an AD lookup for it or anything. I just build it because we have a common theme. We go through and run against the various vCenters we have. We build it out into an array. And then, like I said earlier, I have a lot of times where I write host for stuff. That way, I have some type of debugging when I go into Tower and go, well, why didn't they get an email? Well, it says they don't have it. Now I gotta go figure out why. And then we do an if check to make sure they actually have something there so they don't just get a blank email. We run through, we add it all together, give it a name, and just send out the email. And I just schedule this script to run every day. I don't know, 8 a.m. I think. It's usually when they come in. And then I have another one that runs, which I like a lot better. I don't like particularly getting the email. Just like this. Just like when I show you. Hey, there we go. Basically, what we do with this channel here is that you have the ability to turn the alerts off and just say when I get mentioned. So you only get notified when you get mentioned in that channel. And then I go through and I output all this information for them, and then I have it tag them. And that way, they're not getting an email. It can't be filtered to a folder. I can go in here and say, say, hey, what are we doing with this? Are we doing something with it? Are we sitting on them? And I don't know. I know a lot of people have seen my presentation on snapshots, but VMware's recommendation is no longer in 3 days because you can have I/O corruption, you can have general corruption of the data, which is really bad, and then you can have performance issues. So on production VMs, I don't allow it to be longer than 3 days if I can avoid it. Sometimes you just can't do it, but when someone says I have a performance issue to the VM and I see they have a snapshot longer than 3 days, I go, you should probably take care of that. And I didn't point it out when I was in here. Here we go. That's how I filter that out. Oops. I pull the tag assignment on the VM, and then I just filter it out. And that's the reason we are making status and owner tags critical in our environment. That way the VM guy knows what the VM's for, usually. Because when I started, we didn't. And I'd go to Dave and I'd go, hey, what's this VM do? It's like, I don't know. Okay. I moonlight if anyone wants me to write them scripts. They may not look pretty, but they'll work. Anything else? Man, I can hear the crickets. What was that?
Too early, the crickets froze last night.
I was worried that the water in my camper was going to freeze last night. Ooh. All right. We have more questions. Jeff says, if you have a VMware host in vCenter but not in a cluster, how do you deploy an OVA? With the VMware deploy OVF, it seems there'd be no way to provide the vCenter address and a host address. Is this just not possible? So I haven't done much with the deployment of the OVAs through Tower yet. If I would have to guess on the modules that I have played with, even though it says vCenter address, you could specify the host instead and deploy directly to the host. I don't think you'd have to go through vCenter if you didn't want to. Let's pull up your module here real quick and see. Let me share that out real quick. New share. Oh, hey, Jeremy, thanks. Is that what I'm getting ready to Google for?
I assume so.
Hey, there we go. Yeah, cluster isn't a required. I don't believe it's required. You can probably use. What examples do they give here? I don't see a host on here. Normally they put a host on here. Well, that's the host name for the. Oh, yep, right there. You're right. Yep. Yeah, so you could deploy directly to your ESXi host. If the host is in vCenter, when you put in the host IP, it rejects the request to deploy the OVA. You have to take the host out of vCenter, deploy the OVA, then put the host back into vCenter. That seems backwards. Do you have any experience with the OVA deployment? Jeff, are you in our Slack channel? I think he is, but I don't know. Just our Slack server in general. I don't think so. I will send you an invite. Give me just 1 second here. Jeff, if you could drop me your email address, I will. Oh, actually, copy invite link. Here we go. All right, and I know there are some people in here who are not in our Slack. Would they like an invite as well? That's on my wish list, but it's not high on my priority list.
We don't do them very often.
Yeah. I will mess with some next week. Okay. Anything else? Or more questions for Jeremy?
Yeah, so is there a way to limit Ansible from running, I guess, X number of scripts at a time, like simultaneously, to, I guess, limit CPU on the host or whatever?
I actually wanted to go backwards. I usually want to let it run more jobs. That would be a question for Jeremy, if Jeremy wants to step up, Mike, because I know you've messed with it before.
I don't know of a way to limit the number of tasks. I only know the limit on the number of hosts that you run against. Does that make sense? I don't know how to limit it, the number of tasks per play to a certain host. Not that I'm aware of. I don't think.
Are you talking tasks or jobs?
I guess it's a combination of, or at least initially I was thinking if you had maybe 30 VM requests at the same time and were getting approved by different people, then
Gotcha.
you would potentially kill the cluster or something like that, or your data store or whatever.
Yep. So, in my experience, and I think Jeremy's changed it at this point, we had it when we initially deployed Tower, it would only run one job at a time. So if someone submitted a VM request, it would do that workflow template and work through all those jobs before it would move on to the next thing. And the reason I know it was like that is I had a job that just sat there and spun for almost 20 hours, and there were, I don't know, 17 more jobs in queue. And we were like, what's going on? And that's how we found that out. But there is a setting in Tower, I believe, that you can set to change how many. I think ours is set to like, it can run 5 jobs simultaneously. Now, you saw earlier when I pulled up the one that had all my reports on it, that has them run all at the same time because that's how I have it set. But Tower itself will only run the first 5, and then it'll run, I think I have 7 on there, so it'll run the next 2 after it frees up more slots. So yeah, it has its own bottleneck, for the lack of a better term. It'll throttle it down essentially. And you could do that from an approval aspect too, if you don't auto approve your VMs or whatever. Or if you deployed like AWS does, where you can do like, a 2-core, 4 gig CPU machine where you don't need to do anything. It should limit it on how many times it'll do it at a time. Now, if someone wrote a script and they deployed 30 VMs from one job, I'm sorry about your cluster. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Your reports is one job. You said only do 5 reports at a time.
Yeah, but if I ran it as a, it depends on how you do your VM deployment. If you're using Ansible's modules, it'll only do them one at a time. But if someone wrote a PowerShell script to deploy the VM, and they did a for each, and it doesn't have the wait on customization, it could just go boom, 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 boom. That'd be another thing. If you don't have that wait on customization, as soon as VMware acknowledges the fact that it has the deployment request, it moves on. So you could have VMware deploying 15 VMs because it's not waiting on the customization to report that job as good. Because it doesn't always, but it should report the job as failed if the customization fails. I've had times when join domain doesn't always work, and it doesn't fail the job, but that job also runs significantly longer, so I know to go in and look for it. I'm actually wanting to write at some point a validation to go back and go, hey, this actually failed, and then fail out the whole job itself. But 9 times out of 10, it has always worked, long as you have your networking correct. Usually that's what happens. Someone will pick a network that doesn't have DHCP on it and deploy the VM, and it gets a 169 address and doesn't join the domain. So, All right, I quit. I'm done. I think that's it. Pick up the mess I made up here. It was broken when I got here, all right? Oh, probably shouldn't close that. Huh? That's a him question.
Jeremy, do you know what the licensing costs were on Tower? Do you remember? I mean, ours might be a little different, but I don't
Yeah,
know
it was
what.
like 14 grand for 100 hosts, and you only get 100 hosts with that licensing plan, and you buy them in bundles.
Yeah, so yeah, it was like 14 grand for us, and 100 hosts. And so hosts are variable. I mean, because we're using that scripting server, that's one host, and we're running PowerShell script against who knows how many hosts, but it's still only one as far as Tower is concerned. So, is that all the questions online? All right. Well, I'm going to end the Zoom part of it. Well, we're going to do the drawings next, but those are only for the in-house folks, because of some of the prizes that we have require special shipping if we were to ship them, and I'm not going to do that. So battery packs, can't. So anyways, thanks for joining online.